Good morning. I'm Joanna Long, and I think virtually everybody here knows that, almost. I'm coordinator for this morning's service. Welcome to all, members, wanderers and wandering members, friends, neighbors, visitors. If it's your first time here, we hope you'll sign our guest book. It's just to the left of the door in the back. And if you'd like to tell us who you are, is there anyone who's here for the first time who'd like to say who you are? Would you like to say?
This is Esme and I'm Polly. We're from Killington.
Okay. Delighted to meet you. Thank you for coming, and come again soon. Leon Dunkley, our minister, will give the reflection today. How do we find peace without consensus, he asks. How indeed. We have hearing assistance devices and large print versions of the hymns and order of service on the back tables if you need them. And Monica is here. She will be leading SE this Sunday downstairs, and before that we're going to have a story. After the service, we invite you to visit with each other in whatever setting you find more comfortable. You can join us for coffee, and there was more than coffee down there when I came in. Masks are optional, although out of caution, we ask people downstairs to wash their own cup and utensils. Or you can just stay here in the sanctuary, or it says here, enjoy the porch in the open air. That's a little more problematic today. What has it got in its pockets? I don't suppose any of you have that magic ring, but if there's anything there that might ring or buzz or otherwise betray its presence, please silence it or switch it off now. Next Sunday, the reflection will be by the eminent author, historian, and Royalton resident, Tom Powers. I wouldn't want to miss that. There are other important announcements in your order of service, and have I missed anything that needs to be announced, or do you have something we don't know about yet?
I do.
You do.
Just a reminder that Joelle and I will be leading the social justice meeting after this service concludes in the parlors at maybe 11:15, 11:30. I look forward to seeing you all. It's gonna be fun.
It's spring, and yesterday was Earth Day. Dylan Thomas celebrated beginnings and childhood, and he captured nature's inexorable cycles. In a poem that Bob Burgess read beautifully from here some years ago, Fern Hill. Now as I was young and easy under the apple boughs about the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green, the night above the dingle starry, time let me hail and climb, golden in the heyday of his eyes. And honored among wagons, I was prince of the apple towns, and once below a time I lordly had the trees and leaves trail with daisies and barley down the rivers of the windfall light. And as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns about the happy yard, and singing as the farm was home, in the sun that is young once only, time let me play and be golden in the mercy of his means. And green and golden, I was huntsman and herdsman. The calves sang to my horn. The foxes on the hills barked, clear and cold, and the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the holy streams. All the sun long it was running. It was lovely. The hay fields high as the house, the tunes from the chimneys. It was air and playing, lovely and watery, and fire green as grass. And nightly under the simple stars, as I rode to sleep, the owls were bearing the farm away. All the moon long I heard, blessed among stables, the night jars flying with the ricks, and the horses flashing into the dark. And then to awake, and the farm like a wanderer white with the dew, come back, the cock on his shoulder. It was all shining. It was Adam and Maiden. The sky gathered again, and the sun grew round that very day. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light, in the first spinning place, the spellbound horses walking warm out of the whinnying green stable onto the fields of praise. And honored among foxes and pheasants by the gay house, under the new-made clouds and happy as the heart is long, in the sun born over and over, I ran my heedless ways. My wishes raced through the house-high hay, and nothing I cared at my sky-blue trades that time allows in all his tuneful turning, so few and such morning songs, before the children, green and golden, follow him out of grace. Nothing I cared in the lamb-white days, that time would take me up to the swallow-throned loft by the shadow of my hand, in the moon that is always rising, nor that riding to sleep I should hear him fly with the high fields, and wake to the farm forever fled from the childless land. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me, green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea.
First became a teacher at the college level in 1998 and worked very hard to get the degree so that I could teach at college. And I was terrified to begin. So I did two things, well, three things actually. The first thing I did was go to office next buy day planners and post-it notes and cue cards and calendars and colored pencils and highlighters, magic markers, everything that I thought I might need to gather my attention so that I could sit before students who were bold enough, fearless enough, courageous enough to attend the music class at Brooklyn College. So I did that first. The second thing I did was make the mistake of reading The Artist's Way. I say make the mistake of reading The Artist's Way because there was one particular passage in that book that said, after you prepare for what you are about to do, don't use your preparation. I took that to heart. I also had the pleasure of watching a documentary film about a professor. I can't remember the subject title. I can't remember what he taught about, but he taught about going to the room before the class began, about an hour before the class began, and cleaning the room of all sort of distraction, of all sorts of debris, and evening out things, making sure that the cupboard doors were all closed, making sure that the pencils weren't scattered around the room, making sure that the floor was relatively clean, putting all of the chairs in a circle so that everyone who would enter the room would have a place to stay that was equal to every other place in the room. It was a physical way of recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, I thought. And then the professor, 10 minutes before the class began, walked into the center of the circle that he had created and laid down on the ground and waited for the students to come in. The students did come in, obviously somewhat confused. He made enough physical motion to let the students know that there wasn't a medical emergency. And then he proceeded to teach his class. Good morning, and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. The title of this morning's reflection is A Crucible That Can Hold Us. It's about finding peace amidst discord. There was a time in North Carolina when I laid down on the ground and I looked up at the sky and I saw the beautiful turkey vultures circling. I had two books by my side. One was The City of God by St. Augustine, and the other one was Animal Speak by a guy named Ted Andrews, I believe. Animal Speak is a book about spirit animals that cross your path, and when a certain animal crosses your path, you're supposed to look that animal up and understand what gift it has to bring and to deliver to your life. So if you see a raccoon cross the road, you might look it up and notice that the raccoon has a mask. So it might be your time to either put on a mask or take off your mask, depending on how your life is going. You get to be the judge of that. I discovered the turkey vulture. I wanted to commit to theology, so I didn't read the Ted Andrews book. I tried to read City of God, which I found impenetrable. So I resorted to the turkey vulture story and found it very fascinating. The turkey vulture has vision 8 times sharper than our own, they say. They can see the risings of the morning of the year. So when you see the turkey vulture circling, oftentimes the turkey vulture is circling in a plume of air that's rising. So that's the escalator. Right? It's an easier way to do it than the laborious flapping of wings. You can take advantage of what comes our way. This morning, it was hilarious trying to get here after they carved the roads down and leveled them in East Barnard, which are beautiful roads now, but it's been raining for 2.5 days. So it is slicker than you can imagine. I was driving sideways, trying to get here, trying to go fast enough to get here in time to set up with Joelle, but slow enough not to jet off the road and end up in an embankment. I got here and the sound was not working, so we tried to fix the sound. We got here and the television in the back room was not working, so we tried to fix that. And then at 9:58, I pressed print on my computer and the printer is not working. So I did my best to remember what I spent my night writing about, which was about partly about Peggy Kenenstein, partly about what it felt like to be in an operating room, in the emergency room, and to sit down in that place with the blaring lights and the beeps and the shiny, flashing machines that keep our blood pressure and heart rate in full display. And just the brightness and the warmth of Peggy's smile when I came around the corner, that was really fun. And then the first 3 minutes when I pretended that we were in a coffee shop and she was laughing with me together, just a casual conversation, before we started to talk about what was happening. And then just a beautiful time we spent together, and I thought to myself, there are lots of different churches in the world. You know, this is a sanctuary, and it's an intentional one. You can drive by it, find it on Google, and then come in, and it's got a website that says church, sanctuary, and all the things you would imagine a church to say. But the ER at DHMC, the emergency room at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, is also a kind of church, invested to the nines in keeping us physically alive, just as this house is invested to the nines at keeping us spiritually alive. I tried to imagine this place as a spiritual emergency room. Didn't quite work, because we don't take weekly trips to the emergency room to chat and have coffee. But I did like thinking of North Chapel in that beautiful a way. It made me reflect on what we were thinking about, how to find consensus with someone with whom you disagree. I went to pick up a friend a few weeks ago in Boston. I went to find her at South Station, where the trains come in. That's where she was arriving, so I tried to get there. I was early by about an hour, so I decided to take a quick trip to an old place that I used to go to get lunch. It was called Kelly's Roast Beef, and I went there. When I used to go there, it was a little place on the shore, on the beach. Now it's its own little sort of palace in this sort of corporate area, and I went there even though my stomach was not ready for it. And I got the fried clams, which was so good until I paid the cost of my the town of Revere was originally called North Chelsea, and it was given that name in the 1840s, 1841 actually. And 3 decades later, in 1872, it was renamed after Paul Revere, the American patriot. I looked up the history because I was wondering how the town of Revere got its name. As I was thinking about the subject today, about how to stand with difference, how to be with someone with whom you disagree, I thought that reverence was the most beautiful way of doing that. So of course I was interested in this town called Revere. And then I tried to reflect upon the likelihood that a town in Boston would name itself after something as esoteric as that. I thought it was unlikely. So it's really about Paul Revere. But we have a connection with Paul Revere. How many people, just show of hands, know what it is? Paul Revere was worked with metals. He forged beautiful metal things, and he worked with silver and gold and all sorts of metals. He made the bell that we rang this morning. That's a Paul Revere bell. In fact, there are 5 bells made by Paul Revere in the town of Woodstock. So when we ring out that sound, we're connecting to the town of Revere in this strange sort of way. But here's the thing. So if you are standing with someone with whom you disagree, and you're entrenched, and you're kind of dug in, and you believe what it is you believe with all of your passion, and you know they believe what they believe with all of their passion, how do you meet? How do you connect with someone with whom you so boldly disagree? Do you entrench and just dig in and say my way or the highway? Do you soften to try to put on another person's perspective? How many people do that? How many people soften and try to say something? Oh, really? That's good. That's good. Usually it's like, no. It's hard to soften and see something else. But there's I think it was Eisenhower who said, if you have a problem that seems unsolvable and too big to manage, make it larger. Make it larger. Magnify it until you can stand in reverence of it. Magnify it until you and the person with whom you disagree are both looking at something that is beyond us. And see if you can find connection in that way. A lot of times we're fighting over relatively small things, a nuance in the law that has terrible consequences, a tax code, the guilty verdict or the not guilty verdict of a particular person, and the implications for American society. But if we get larger, if we think in larger terms, if we see ourselves as part of a larger whole, a larger system that loves before we know who the person is, that loves initially, instantly, and with the strength of life itself. That's a good place to begin. Not all churches are like that, but all emergency rooms are like that. When you come in, people don't say, I don't know, did you vote for Clinton? They just say, what's wrong and can I be of use? Can I be of service? And for those of us who have the good fortune to be able to arrive at the emergency room before something terrible happens, it's wonderful to know that we are in loving hands. You know, some of us have devoted our lives to that moment, and I thank you, doctors, who have given themselves to the health and well-being of the community. But what's the cost of surrendering what we think for a moment? What's the consequence of just saying, let me suspend what I believe in for a moment until I have a chance to see what it is that you're feeling and see what it is you're suffering from? If it's something as trite as the sound system doesn't work, or as small as I can't get the DVD to play, how do we take a step back, put our backs on the ground of the earth, and look up at that which is beyond us, and put things in perspective? And with that energy, greet the person with whom we disagree. I grew up in a very liberal family, African-American family in a predominantly white neighborhood. And I grew up sort of socially at church, which was a profoundly liberal place. A deeply humanist tradition with a minister whose Christianity I adored. His name was Harold Dean, and I thought it was hard for him having to serve a humanist congregation. He's Princeton trained, and I thought Presbyterian by background. I thought that was true. As a side story, and I've told this before, I always kind of twitch at the word Presbyterians. I don't mean to imply a prejudice. I mean to remember a story that Jim Hightower told me. Jim Hightower, the comedian from Texas, he said, "I have trouble with Presbyterians. I have trouble with them," and I thought this was going to be some sort of racist joke or something terrible. And he said, if you rearrange the letters of Presbyterians, you end up with Britney Spears. and you do. I share that because Jim Hightower is a liberal thinking person in a profoundly conservative environment, and he's had to hone the skill of finding a way to access the person with whom he disagrees. So how do we do that? How do we soften or lighten and able to find the joy and the laughter, not just the points of disagreement? And instead of winning the war, just spend time with one another. I wrote a 12-page poem years ago, at the beginning of the COVID times. I was so angry at the former president that I didn't know what to do, so I wrote this huge, long diatribe of my angers, and I gave it to him. And I was like, talk to me about this poem, and he wouldn't. He wouldn't. It was well written, you know. It wasn't too obnoxious, but he wouldn't. And it's not because he doesn't love me. It was because I don't know why. I'd have to ask him. You know, his name is Sean, and if he comes up and visits, just pin him to the wall and abusively ask him that question. You'll appreciate it. But what I did learn in that process is that there is so much more depth in our love and in the beauty of our friendship that has lasted since we were in 3rd grade and is still strong today than there is in some sort of political victorious conversation. Hosea Ballou, who was a Universalist minister from this area, one of the founding figures inside of Universalism, wrote a treatise of atonement in 1804. It's a very, we have a portrait of him hanging in the library. He said, we need not think alike to love alike. How do we live that out? So I can only say this in closing, is there is when I was in the emergency room with Peggy, the only song that came to me was driven by the holiness of that moment in the emergency room, and thinking about it in a different way. And I was guided by the thoughts of Marion Williamson. You know, Marion Williamson, the spiritual healer. She told us a story about when she was young. She was a bartender, and this man came into the bar and he sat down and trusted her and told her his tale of woes. He started to talk about his wife and the troubles that they were having in their marriage. And if you know Marion Williamson, she offered some solutions. Here's what you can do, she said. And the man said, look, you know, I'm really only interested in sort of telling my side of the story. I don't want to hear, you know, I need your sympathy, but like, I don't need your counsel. And she stopped and she said, oh, you think this is a bar. I know it's a church. So I wonder if there's a way, next time we find a disagreement, to just try to remember what's really valuable in life, and try to find the holy in all things. Peter Mayer has a song. I won't remember the words, but I think the first verse was, when I was a boy each week, someday we would go to church and pay attention to the priest, and he would sing the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. So, even though things might go wrong, on the day you prepared a much more coherent service, try to keep about you the wits to make sense of the good news of the day. And please rise in body and in spirit for the singing of our closing hymn.